So here in 2022, we have 3 brand new Tom Ford perfumes, part of the private blend line, of course. We have Rose d'Amalfi, Rose de Chine, and Rose de Russie. Well, today we're going to be taking a closer look at the second one. I've been wearing this one over the past few days. This one is called Rose de Chine. I'm excited to give you my thoughts on this fragrance, let you know what it smells like, so make sure to stay tuned. Now, before I begin my video on Rose de Chine by Tom Ford, the new release for 2022, part of a trio of releases, I do want to start things off by mentioning that if you are a fan of fragrance-related content, please do consider supporting the channel by subscribing to it. Hit the bell icon so you can be notified on future uploads, and of course give this video a thumbs up if you take something of value from today's review. It's absolutely free and it would help me tremendously. You have no idea. So here we have one of the 3 rose-based perfumes. And why do rose for 3 brand new releases? I'm not entirely sure, but in my experience, rose is a very versatile ingredient. You have some spicy rose fragrances like Rose 31 by Le Labo. You have some soapy rose fragrances like Bulle de Rose by Le Parfum de Rosine. And here you have kind of a resinous balsamic rose. So in the base you have myrrh, and then you also have labdanum, but I think it's less about the rose and more about the peony that's in this fragrance, because it is called Chinese peony. That's the specific ingredient being used in here. And of course, whenever I think of rose and peony together, I think of Delina by Parfum de Marly. So of course, going into it, I was kind of thinking, is this one going to be in any way, shape, or form similar to Delina? And the answer to that question is a resounding no. It doesn't have lychee, it doesn't have this unconventional fruity sweetness, it doesn't smell like Very Good Girl by Carolina Herrera, and it also doesn't have that vanillic undercurrent that makes Delina so special. So it definitely goes in its own direction. I don't know if I can necessarily compare this one to anything else that I've tried, which makes my review of this one, for me at least, that much more interesting. So I'm excited to talk to you about the smell. Let's take a quick look at the presentation. So of course, in the opening of this fragrance, you are going to get that really pungent, in a good way of course, rose and peony combination. Now the peony is very clean, very gentle, very wispy, and the rose definitely has a stronger personality of the two. Now, when I did my review of Rose d'Amalfi, I mentioned that there was something kind of aromatic about this fragrance, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if there are certain ingredients in here that are not necessarily reflected in the note breakdown, but I'm getting something that smells herbal, perhaps like clary sage, or maybe another floral ingredient that kind of gives off that herbal, aromatic vibe, almost vegetal in a sense. But it's a really unique combination of peony and rose that you're going to get in here. But I think the myrrh has a lot to do with it. And so, of course, you have bitter myrrh, which can smell a little rubbery, a little leathery. That's what I think is happening in here. And then you have sweet myrrh, which is known as a Popinax. That's what you're going to find in fragrances like Jubilation 25 by Amouage. That's not what you're going to get in here. But you are going to get a little bit of that labdanum in the base, and what the labdanum does is it adds a slight touch of sweetness, but also a great touch of an exotic quality. And so I think it's a combination of those two things that is really nice about the fragrance, where it doesn't become overly rubbery or leathery, but it's not overly sweet or overly ambery. So the base ingredients don't take away from the shine of the rose. I hope that makes sense. So it's a really interesting pink and red bouquet of floral ingredients that you're going to get. And I think that, while in the opening you're going to get more rose than anything, it eventually does dry down to a nice even balance of the rose and the peony. As I'm smelling it now, it has the sensuality of the rose, it has that resinous component, but then there's this very gentle, soft quality about it. Now with Rose d'Amalfi, it does actually open up with a bit of sweetness, and so it's actually much sweeter than this one. And I think, and I stand by this, Rose d'Amalfi is still the easiest one to recommend. Rose de Russie, in my opinion, is the most difficult one to recommend, just because it has a bit of a smoky touch to it. This one is kind of right in the middle. Even in this sort of travel atomizer set, it was literally in the middle between Rose d'Amalfi and Rose de Russie. But if you're looking for a rose that smells natural, doesn't have too many other ingredients, too much other fluff, if you will, taking away from the influence of the rose, then I think this is the one for you. If you want a perfume where the rose is kind of disguised by all of these other ingredients around it, then of course there are many other choices on the market, but I really do like how it's almost like a deconstructed Delina by Parfum de Marly. You keep the rose and the peony, but you take away the vanilla, you take away the lychee, and you're left with this sort of bare bones, almost like slightly bitter and herbal take on that DNA, which is really interesting. But at the end of the day, this one definitely smells unique. In terms of making direct comparisons, I really can't. And that's one of the things that I love about Tom Ford, is that his fragrances are, you know, pioneers. You know, you think of something like Tuscan Leather, how many other brands went and twisted or cloned that DNA? You think of fragrances like Tobacco Vanille, Noir de Noir, even Oud Wood. You know, I think Oud Wood has inspired so many other fragrances out there. And so in the case of his fragrances, one thing that you can expect from the house of Tom Ford is a great deal of originality. And of course, with somebody like me who's always interested in trying new stuff, that's always appreciated. Let's go ahead and finish things off with my overall assessment. So first up, in terms of the uniqueness and the overall smell, like I said before, definitely unique. I love how Tom Ford always values and prioritizes uniqueness in their fragrances. And the overall smell, not the easiest rose-based fragrance to recommend. Like I said, Rose d'Amalfi is much easier to recommend than this one, but I think this one does things rather well. And so I'm really appreciative of the DNA, and I'm going to spend a bit more time wearing this one going forward. In terms of the longevity, you can expect about 6 to 7 hours. Rose de Russie, you're gonna get like 9 or 10 hours. This one is kind of mid-range. Projection on this one is also quite good. You can expect this one to project within an arm's length for the first 45 minutes or so, and it doesn't start to sit closer to the skin until about that 4.5 to 5 hour mark. Versatility, I think, is pretty good. I can see this one working really well in every season except for the winter time, just because it is rather floral, and whenever I think of floral perfumes, I typically think of springtime. But this one is also kind of gentle enough that you can wear it in a really hot weather too. I think this one is perfectly unisex, even though it might be the fragrance of the three that is the most feminine leaning, but still unisex nonetheless. And I think this one is going to appeal to somebody who's a little bit older. You can wear this one casually or dressed up as well. In terms of the presentation, the actual private blend 50 ml bottle looks really nice, and the travel atomizer for this set that I actually went halvesies on with a good friend of mine, Chris, from the channel Casual Fragrances, shout out to him. This set looks really nice too, very convenient to travel with, and I typically do travel with the cans when I'm in the need to sort of reapply throughout the day, but in the case of the 50 ml, I do think it's quite nice, especially when you look at the color of the bottle and how the three are differentiated, so I think that looks pretty cool. But my final verdict on this fragrance is, if you are looking for an herbal and aromatic rose-based fragrance with an incensey, ambery, but very dry and slightly rubbery or leathery component, definitely check this one out. I think the myrrh has a pretty strong influence in it, and I think it's a rose that is very well done, and it's a rose for people who are not into the overly spicy, overly sweet, or overly ambery types of rose ingredients, but you want kind of a lush floral bouquet where the rose is sitting at the heart and you probably have some secondary players in the background. So a job well done, Mr. Ford. Keep up the good work. Maybe for a future release with, you know, spring right around the corner, we can focus on some freshies. I know we have the new Costa Azzurra Parfum. I'm gonna need to buy that eventually as well. I tried it recently and I don't need it, but I need it. Thanks for watching. Love you guys. I appreciate you. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, give it a thumbs up. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.